We cannot have an entire American business community that is giving up on American workers and then importing millions of illegal laborers.
This is wild. So this is JD Vance over the weekend with Martha Raddatz.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs, and Donald Trump is the problem and not Kamala Harris's open border? Americans are so fed up with what's going on, and they have every right to be. And I really find this exchange, Martha, sort of interesting because you seem to be more focused with nitpicking everything that Donald Trump has said rather than acknowledging that apartment complexes in the United States of America are being taken over by violent gangs. I worry so much more about that problem than anything else here.
All right, Knowles, you beat me to the punch there, but I think it illustrates the point you were about to make.
It absolutely does. If this story, for those who haven't followed it, is that a Venezuelan prison gang took over Aurora, Colorado, and now controls multiple apartment buildings in this Colorado town. And ABC News' response, the liberal establishment media response, is to say, hey, it's only a few buildings. The Venezuelan prison gang only took over a few buildings. It shows you that even when we're talking about violent prison gangs from foreign countries, people who shouldn't be here, they have to be right. Our enemies have to be right. The other guy always has to be right. We always have to be in the wrong. And so you're going to see this echo throughout all of history. When Hernan Cortez conquers the Aztec Empire that was cutting out victims still beating hearts and kicking their bodies down the temple at Tenochtitlan to the tune of some 80,000 people in 4 days. We're talking about people like the Carib Islanders who practiced ritual cannibalism, or the Iroquois, or many other Native Americans who practiced ritual cannibalism, including cannibalism of babies, according to some historical accounts. They still have to be right. We have to be wrong. We have to be wrong as Christopher Columbus, as Cortez, as the Pilgrims on the Mayflower. The Founding Fathers have to be wrong. Ordinary Americans today who don't want Venezuelan gangs taking over their town, we have to be in the wrong. It's as though the left started with the conclusion and then they just backfill the evidence.
Yeah, well, let me show you another clip of just sort of how we always have to be in the wrong, to your point. This is JD Vance again. Over the last couple of days, he was with New York Times, I guess, quote-unquote journalist Lulu Garcia Navarro, and they were talking about illegals and how it relates to the U.S. labor force.
The reason that there is a housing crisis is that not enough houses have been built.
And that we have 25 million people who shouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, this is the thing.
I think it's both.
I know you do. I don't think that many people who look into this agree with you, but about a third of the construction workforce in this country is Hispanic. Of those, a large proportion are undocumented. So how do you propose to build all the housing necessary that we need in this country by removing all the people who are working in construction?
Well, I think it's a fair question because we know that back in the 1960s when we had very low levels of illegal immigration, Americans didn't buy houses, didn't build houses. But of course they did. And I'm being sarcastic, of course, in service of a point, Lulu, the assumption that because a large number of home builders now are using undocumented labor, that's the only way to build homes. I think, again,
the country is much bigger. The need is much bigger. I mean, I'm not arguing in favor of illegal immigration. I'm asking how you would deal with the knock-on effect of your proposal to remove millions of people who work in a critical part of the economy.
Well, I think that what you would do is you would take, let's say, for example, the 7 million prime-age men who have dropped out of the labor force. You absolutely could re-engage folks into the American labor market. This is, I think—
To work in construction?
Of course you could. Think about this from the perspective of an American company, okay? I want them to go searching in their own country for their own citizens, sometimes people who may be struggling with addiction or trauma, get them re-engaged in American society. We cannot have an entire American business community that is giving up on American workers and then importing millions of illegal laborers. That is what we have thanks to Kamala Harris's border policies. I think it's one of the biggest drivers of inequality. It's one of the biggest reasons why we have millions of people who have dropped out of the labor force. Why try to re-engage an American citizen in a good job if you can just import somebody from Central America who's going to work under the table for poverty wages? It is a disgrace, and it has led to the evisceration of the American middle class.
Michael, before we get to the nuts and bolts on that, I have to say that watching JD, who I really think in the last 2 or 3 months has just leveled up in a really significant way, he sort of is what probably you wanted more earlier than I did. Someone on the right who could calmly explain everything in a sensible way, occasionally using sarcasm, and really exposing the absurdity of these people. Because when she says, well, I'm not making the argument for illegal immigration, it's like, lady, actually you are.
Of course she is. And why can JD remain calm? He can remain calm because he has facts at his disposal, and he has solid first principles, and he has a command of logic, so he can come to conclusions. Really, the most ridiculous part of the interview is that first part where the woman says, we have a shortage of housing in this country, and it's because of all the dastardly Republicans. And JD says, I think it might have something to do with the 25 million people who aren't supposed to be here. And this woman says, without a hint of irony, well, I actually agree to disagree. I think a lot of people who look into it don't really agree with you. Like, lady, this is not a controversial point. When you have a certain number of homes and you have a certain number of people, then the housing market is going to correspond to the number of people who are looking for housing. That's not like, if you want to make some argument in favor of illegal immigration on top of that, be my guest. This woman can't grasp basic math.
We always rave about 1775's coffee, but they've stepped it up with some new additions. If you're serious about your mornings, their protein creamer is a game changer. With 10 grams of whey protein per serving, this isn't your average cup of joe. Whether you're fasting to keep your energy up or building strength for that extra boost, whey protein helps with recovery and keeps your metabolism firing. We're here to help you perform at your best while others just load you with fat and sugar. Looking at you, Duncan. In addition to the creamer, 1775 Coffee just launched new coffee pods, making it easier to take 1775 on the go while still delivering the same high quality and single origin beans. And if you're after a real mental edge, their new brain-boosting mushroom blend will have you more focused than a big tech exec scrambling to figure out how to deal with Rumble. Head on over to 1775coffee.com, grab your protein creamer, and check out the new lineup. Fuel your day with products that deliver. Use code Rubin to get 15% off.
On a somber Wednesday evening, the skies near Reagan National Airport bore witness to a catastrophe. An American Airlines passenger jet, operating as Flight 5342, collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. The impact sent shockwaves through the nation, leaving behind a trail of devastation and unanswered questions. The incident, which unfolded in the blink of an eye, claimed the lives of all 67 souls aboard both aircraft, marking a dark day in aviation history. As the news of the collision spread, a sense of disbelief and grief gripped the nation. Families and loved ones of those on board were left grappling with the sudden and profound loss. The crash site, a stretch of the Potomac River, became the epicenter of a frantic search and rescue operation. Amidst the wreckage, the hope of finding survivors dwindled with each passing hour. The collision has raised serious concerns about aviation safety protocols, particularly in congested airspace near major airports. The incident has also cast a spotlight on the crucial role of air traffic control in preventing such disasters. As investigators begin the arduous task of piecing together the events leading up to the collision, the nation mourns the loss of those who perished in this tragic accident. The investigation, a complex and multifaceted endeavor, is expected to be lengthy and thorough. It will delve into various aspects, including the actions of the pilots, the role of air traffic control, weather conditions, and any potential mechanical failures. The National Transportation Safety Board, the agency responsible for investigating aviation accidents, has dispatched a team of experts to the crash site to gather evidence and analyze the wreckage. In the immediate aftermath of the collision, a massive recovery operation swung into action. First responders, braving the chilling waters of the Potomac River, worked tirelessly to locate survivors and recover the remains of those lost. The operation, a race against time, faced numerous challenges, including the fast-moving current, poor visibility, and the sheer magnitude of the debris field. Despite the daunting conditions, rescue workers remained steadfast in their mission, driven by a profound sense of duty and compassion for the victims and their families. As days turned into nights, the recovery effort continued unabated, with teams working around the clock to search for those still unaccounted for. The grim task of recovering the remains of the victims was made even more challenging by the fact that some of the wreckage had sunk to the bottom of the river. Divers, using specialized equipment, meticulously combed the riverbed, carefully retrieving any human remains or personal belongings they could find. The recovery of the aircraft's black boxes, crucial pieces of evidence that record flight data and cockpit audio, was a top priority for investigators. These devices, often referred to as flight recorders, could provide vital clues about the moments leading up to the collision. The recovery effort, a testament to the resilience and dedication of those involved, continued for several weeks. The painstaking process of identifying the victims, a somber and emotionally charged task, relied on DNA analysis and other forensic techniques. As the recovery operation drew to a close, the focus shifted to the investigation, with the NTSB working tirelessly to determine the cause of the collision and prevent similar tragedies from occurring in the future. At the heart of the investigation into the mid-air collision lies the critical role of air traffic control. As the eyes and ears of the skies, air traffic controllers bear the immense responsibility of guiding aircraft safely through the airspace, preventing collisions and ensuring the smooth flow of air traffic. In the wake of the tragedy, investigators are meticulously scrutinizing the actions of the air traffic controllers on duty at the time of the accident, examining radar data, communication logs, and other relevant information. One particular area of focus is the fact that a single air traffic controller was responsible for managing both airplanes and helicopters in the vicinity of Reagan National Airport at the time of the collision. This practice, while not uncommon, has raised concerns about potential overwork and the ability of a single controller to effectively manage a high volume of air traffic, especially in a complex airspace like that surrounding a major airport. Adding to the complexity of the situation, reports have emerged suggesting that the air traffic control tower at Reagan National Airport was understaffed on the evening of the accident. The facility, which typically operates with a full complement of controllers, was reportedly short-staffed due to a combination of factors, including sick leave, training, and scheduling issues. The issue of air traffic controller staffing has been a long-standing concern within the aviation industry, with critics arguing that chronic understaffing can lead to controller fatigue, increased workload, and an elevated risk of errors. The investigation is also examining whether there were any deviations from established air traffic control procedures that may have contributed to the collision. Specifically, investigators are looking into reports that the Black Hawk helicopter involved in the accident was flying at an altitude higher than its approved flight path. The helicopter, which was on a training mission, was supposed to be flying at a lower altitude, which would have kept it clear of the airspace used by commercial airliners like the American Airlines jet. As the investigation into the tragic collision progresses, the NTSB is meticulously piecing together the events that led to the disaster. The agency, known for its thoroughness and expertise in aviation accident investigations, is pursuing multiple lines of inquiry, examining factors such as pilot actions, air traffic control procedures, weather conditions, mechanical issues, and human factors. The goal is not only to determine the cause of the accident, but also to identify any systemic safety deficiencies that may have contributed to the tragedy. One of the key pieces of evidence in the investigation is the data retrieved from the flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders of both aircraft. These devices, commonly referred to as black boxes, provide a wealth of information about the performance of the aircraft, the actions of the pilots, and the communications between the aircraft and air traffic control. Analysts are carefully scrutinizing the data from the black boxes, looking for any anomalies or inconsistencies that could shed light on the cause of the collision. In addition to analyzing the black boxes, investigators are also conducting interviews with witnesses, including air traffic controllers, ground crew members, and any individuals who may have observed the accident. These interviews are crucial for gathering first-hand accounts of the events leading up to the collision and for gaining a better understanding of the circumstances surrounding the tragedy. The NTSB is also working closely with the Federal Aviation Administration, the agency responsible for regulating civil aviation, to review air traffic control procedures and identify any potential areas for improvement. The investigation, a complex and time-consuming process, is expected to take several months, if not longer, to complete. The NTSB, committed to transparency and accountability, will release a preliminary report within a few weeks outlining the factual findings of the investigation thus far. However, the final report, which will include the agency's conclusions and safety recommendations, is not expected for at least a year.